Hello and welcome to your weekly podcast from Freestyle Media in partnership with the Magic 5, where you can get 15% off a pair of their custom fit goggles by using the affiliate link in the description to this episode. And I'm also keen to promote the work of Oxalt Strength and Conditioning. So Nathan Oxford, he's been on this pod a few times before. Many of you all know him by now. He works with swimmers and they're getting great results on the gym floor and then in the pool as well. And you can check out his services by going to www.oxalt.com. But here we are, recording this on a Friday morning, and I'm delighted to be joined once more by John Wood. So how are you, mate?
How are we doing? I'm good, thank you very much. It's great to be on here again, and it's always good fun chatting with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I said it's Friday morning. It was my birthday yesterday, so I'd be lying if I said I was feeling, fresh as a daisy. But we are where we are, and we'll see how things are going. But how's training been for you over the summer? We were just talking before when I know you've not actually done a lot of swimming, but you have still been incredibly active.
Yeah, so the club that I swim for, it's a junior squad. We have, I think there's a 12 or 15 of us killer whales in the squad that we kind of swim. We have our own sessions, so we swim 3 to 4 times a week. But over the summer, because we swim at a private school, it's basically been closed since the middle of July. So in the last 6-7 weeks, I've maybe done 3 swims.
Wow.
But it can be a bit frustrating, but it is what it is. So over the last month, I've done 4 gym sessions a week instead of 3. I work on a poolside. I work in a health club, so I can get in the gym very easily between clients and stuff like that. So I've done 4 gym sessions a week instead of 3, and I feel quite strong. And I've been running well. I've been averaging 40k a week as a runner, which for some people is not a lot. Some people that sounds like loads. For me, that's pretty strong. So I feel aerobically quite fit.
Yeah.
And it will be interesting. I've entered local meet, the Gloucester Somerset Masters at Hutton Moor on Sunday, and I'm using that kind of as a bit of training and a bit of a baseline. So I've got 6 events over probably not very long. So it'll be a case of pacing it through it rather than trying to swim as fast as I can.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And of course, you recently moved to London. I'm not sure if you'd moved last time we spoke, but you've kind of moved over the last 3 or 4 months. And how are you settling in?
So I haven't actually officially moved, but what I've got is the facility to now coach in southeast London in Bromley. So I'm trying to build up a client base now, and the target is to officially move. I mean, I'm spending a lot of time here, so it's not like I'm not spending time here, but hoping to officially move early 2024. So.
Okay, no, that sounds good. And so I'm interested then. So obviously, by the time this podcast comes out, the Gloucestershire meet will have taken place.
Yes,
and of course we will know how you got on. But you're doing 400s and 250s, did you say?
Yes, yeah. So I've entered all the hundreds apart from the 100 backstroke, and the only reason for that was so the meet split into 2 sessions.
Yeah,
and it's just so that I had 2 100s in each session.
So is that 100 IM?
Yes,
and then minus 100. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting. I've seen that they publish the psych sheets and all the rest of it. So I've seen there are a couple of very quick swimmers in there. Chris Jones, who I know from Cardiff, and I've known for probably 15 years, racing against him a little bit here and there. So he'll be well off out in front, especially in my current swim condition. But it'll be fun. It's always nice to be on poolside, and it'll be a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris is, I don't know Chris that well. He's obviously been on the podcast before, and I have met him once before at Nationals last year, and kind of see like some of the stuff he puts on Facebook here and there. And I get the impression, based on the conversation I had with him last year, he's kind of just come back into it in the last few years. And I remember him saying he kind of like, when he enters a new age group, he spends the first couple of years really going for it, and then maybe tails off the last few years, focuses a bit more on triathlon. But I feel like he's completely locked in at the moment with his swimming, and he's absolutely going for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It doesn't seem like he doesn't focus on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, because as we're getting older, I mean, I'm 37. I think he's in the age group above me, I think, off the top of my head.
Yeah, he is. He's in the 40 to...
But just doesn't seem to be dropping off, which is amazing, because obviously, in any sport, but you seem to get that drop off from about 30 to 35, especially, and he doesn't really seem to have started fading, and he's coming from a very high height as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You said you've done obviously a lot of running 40k, which to me does sound like a lot. I mean, I did a 8K run the other week, and
Mhm.
last Sunday, and that's probably, I mean, I'd say up to 10K is probably about as far as I generally go, just because I
Yeah,
don't run every week. It's not something
yeah,
that's really ingrained in me, but no, 40K a week is great. And when you last came on the podcast, you did, we talked a lot about how sports can translate, and if you
yeah.
don't chance to get in the pool. And so you said you're feeling aerobically fit, you're feeling strong from the gym, but you
Yes.
mentioned something just about your timing. That's sort of going to be the key thing this weekend.
Yeah, so I swam on Wednesday for 50 minutes or so in a public session, and I felt all right. There wasn't a lot of punch there, but if I felt okay. But the bit that was struggling, especially for the fly and the breaststroke, was just getting any timing going through. I mean, my breaststroke has never really had any timing anyway. And one of the things freestyle wise I've been trying to work on over the last year is trying not to overstretch, because so many swimmers, especially distance swimmers freestyle wise, we get told to stretch as far as we can for every stroke. And I'm 6'3". I've always been a distance swimmer up until being a master swimmer. So one of the problems I have is I do have almost a stopping point. I look like I'm swimming catch up when I'm swimming 1500, and even over 100 or 200. My coach now says, were you planning on doing another 200 after that sort of thing? So that was one of the things I struggled with on Wednesday, was just trying to keep my arms moving. And I think that'll be easier at a higher intensity. Obviously,
Okay.
when you're swimming slightly slower, it's a bit more challenging to keep
Mm.
everything moving at just that little bit more.
Yeah. One of the really interesting things about obviously having you on the podcast and talking to you generally is that you are a swimmer, just like myself and like many of the listeners, but you're also a triathlon coach.
Yes.
And triathlon is something that I'm sure you've done many yourself as well. But I'm
Yeah.
interested to know when you work with triathletes. I guess you have to. I mean, you're a triathlon coach, so you can take your just kind of sprint swimming hat off, if you like.
Yeah.
But when you work with these guys, and you've obviously got the three disciplines: running, cycling, swimming. Are you doing an even split of training with them, or is it more geared towards? Because I know cycling probably is the more dominant sport of the triathlon.
So it depends. It depends very much on the athlete, and it depends on what events are being focused on. Yes, I mean, cycling is the bulk of the time in a race. It doesn't matter whether it's a sprint. So a sprint would be 750 swim, 20k bike, and a 5k run.
Yeah.
So the elites are doing that. Well, if it's a drafting race, they're doing it in about 55 minutes.
Yeah.
But the normal mortal good athletes are doing it in around an hour to an hour and five, and then anything up from that. So they're doing the bike in somewhere between 25 to 27 minutes for drafting races at elite level, and then sort of your normal athletes doing a time trial of doing maybe 35 to 40 minutes. And that goes all the way up then to an Ironman, and some people do even stupid distance, the double Ironmans and decker Ironmans and that sort of thing. But for an Ironman, it's a 3.8k swim, it's 180k on the bike, and it's a marathon run. So the world record is, I want to say 7:35 off the top of my head. It might be a little bit quicker than that, and about 4 hours of that is bike.
Yeah,
or half of the time essentially, or just over half the time, regardless of the distance, is bike. So that can tend to be the volume. So if you're working your sessions out by time, the bike tends to be the majority of the training, but that might not be the majority by number of sessions. From a swimming point of view, the swimming is very much the neglected part from a triathlon for a lot of people, because it's either the part that people don't like or they struggle with, and also because it's the shortest part. And what I try and get people doing, if they've got the time, because it's all, it's the same for us as swimmers as well. It's about what you can do consistently. But I try and get people doing at least 2 swims a week where they can. And it's, I try and balance out between being technical, building a bit of volume, and doing a bit of speed, because by doing some shorter, faster stuff, it means that the longer, steadier stuff, whether it's a 750 or whether it's a 4K swim, becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's something I was going to ask you next, actually. And given that a lot of triathlons tend to the swimming side of a triathlon tends to take place in open water.
Yes.
I've experienced, I've done a few triathlons myself. It's very different. It's a very different feel. Of course, you can't really see in the water. You're lifting your head up in front of you as well. Yeah. So your technique just changes a little bit. So when you're doing technical work with swimmers, presumably in a pool, yes, are you trying to factor in the fact that they're going to have to lift their head up, and are you training them in that way, or are you training them as a normal swimmer?
A bit of both. A bit of both. So I suppose for me, it's quite good. I when I was younger, I was doing a lot of open water racing anyway, so the non-wetsuit stuff from about 15 through to 18, before doing triathlon as well myself. So I'm aware of how that feels, and most, like, there are the odd crazy people who will open water swim all year round.
Yeah.
And fair play to them. You know, I can, the coldest I've got to is 8 degrees, and I wouldn't choose to go that cold.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the focus is on pool swimming and being technical.
Yeah.
But I will do bits of sighting in there or head up swimming, which is no different to getting someone who is a pool swimmer doing head up swimming, because you can either do it, you can take any drill and use it to focus on whatever you like. But things like head up swimming or Tarzan swimming, you can use as a practice for sighting and a practice for just getting comfortable with your body position. But you can also use it to watch what's going on with your hands. You can also use it to focus on getting that slightly higher, faster turnover, which is something that I've had to worry about. So similar with things like catch up, you could use catch up as a drill to make sure that your arms aren't crossing over in the middle, or to make sure you're focusing on that first part of your pull.
Yeah.
So using those drills with the focus in mind, and making sure that, you know, if I was coaching you, Joe, I'd be putting in your session, you're going to do 450s of this as part of your warm up, and this is what I want you to think about. So as long as you as the swimmer, you as the athlete, know what your intention is and what your focus is of a particular drill or a particular swim, it doesn't matter. And also doing shorter, faster stuff for a lot of triathletes. Even on the run, there's not a huge amount of focus on speed sometimes. But what I try and get people to do is to do fast 25s or even fast 12.5s, because it's those bits in a race where you're going around a turn buoy, or you're starting off, where everything goes haywire.
Absolutely.
And it's not about trying to do perfect technique. And again, that's no different for us as pure swimmers now. Well, for me, I'm a pure swimmer really now. It's going, what are the broad brushstrokes that I need to be aware of? What, rather than going, my hand's got to be in this specific position, or my legs have got to be doing this specific kick, it's going, what's my range?
Yeah.
You know, I did an engineering degree, so I kind of work it, my brain goes to tolerances. So you've got a pretty wide tolerance, but it's going, you know, what's the rough area that I need to be in, rather than being too precise, because that slows you down.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We'll get on to pure swimming in a second, but I'm just interested to know, when you are working with triathletes who are, you know, at the very least doing 750-meter swims, but as you say, could be into the Ks. How do they respond when you say to them, "Oh, I want you to do a 12.5-meter sprint or a 25-meter sprint"? Do they like it, or do they think, "Oh, you know, what's the point of this"?
Most of them like it. A lot of them struggle.
Yeah.
And I'm so going to, I can see what you're doing. I can see the efforts going in. You can go faster.
Okay.
And it's not so much that they don't enjoy it. It's trying to unlock that and release that. It's a mental thing as much as a physical thing, in terms of, no, you can go faster. You can generate more speed, because they're just not, especially for a lot of people that I've ended up working with, they're not used to it.
No, that's interesting. Well, look, back to the pure swimming, and so obviously you said yourself you've only done a few swims over the summer.
Yes.
I've still managed to keep up my training as well, but we had a thing with the club that I swim at now, Belper Marlins. We kind of, as masters, we train alongside the age group squad, so we have the same session as them, and they had a week off a few weeks ago, so there was like no training. So I kind of went and did my own training, which was quite fun. You know, trained in quite a different way to, I guess, how I train with the club. But something that we did on Tuesday night just gone was, so it's an hour and a quarter session, and we'd done an hour's worth of swimming. And then we went and did 2 max hundreds off the block, timed. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it. And it's not something that in fact, I've done very little of that since being a master swimmer. The clubs that I've swum at, we've maybe done a bit of speed work at the start of a session, but again, it's never been like, right, this is like a race condition. I want you to really go. The coaches were very much saying, I want to see where everyone is at now at this stage of the season. And it was great. And I was racing alongside a couple of other master swimmers who are a similar speed, and then some of the top age group swimmers that, again, are maybe just a touch faster. Is that something that you enjoyed? Again, if you're swimming with your age group squad, do you get a good opportunity to do this?
Yeah, so it's funny because the group, when I was swimming as an age group swimmer, up until I went to uni, I don't think I ever did any kind of what I would consider now proper sprint work. And by that, I mean doing a proper sprint having a long rest so you can recover properly and do it again. So before you were saying that you'd rested for about 5 or 6 minutes between hundreds, and that for me would kind of almost be the bare minimum that you would require for a 100-meter sprint as having recovery. So I remember doing sets of like 12 100s off the blocks, off like 2.5 minutes. And my coach's viewpoint was 90% of you guys are not going to be doing it at max at the effort that requires you to have 4, 5, 6 minutes recovery. So we're going to do lots and we're going to do short recoveries. And so to then go to uni and do a little bit of that was a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we do a little bit of that. Jez, who's my coach at Bristol Henleys, is a big fan of USRPT. But we'll often do sessions where we do a couple of hundreds, or we'll do 50s that are 10 minutes apart. One of the favourite sets I really enjoyed, maybe at the start of the year, was we went 100, we had 5 minutes rest, and then we did a 75. We had 5 minutes rest, and then we did a 50, and then 5 minutes rest, and then did a 25. And the target throughout the set, and we didn't know this from the start of the session, but the target was to be on the 75 at 75 of the 100 time.
Yeah.
And then 50 to be at 50 of the 75 time, and then on the 25 to be. And then I think we then did a bit of easy paddling, and then we did another 25 at the end or something like that. And doing that fly was interesting.
Yes.
But I really enjoyed that as a set because it's something that, especially when you don't know what's coming as well, and you are just trying to max out everything. Like, you could do that set and you could do it quite comfortably by cruising the 100 and then essentially building through the session. If you go and do a set like that properly, it's really quite hard work.
Yeah, well, so we had James Barrick on the podcast a couple months ago, and he swears by this kind of training. I know that he does this with his masters guys at East Leeds. They'll do, for example, 6 100s, but they'll do it on like a 6-minute turnaround.
Yeah.
And he'll say, like, you know, say just hypothetically you do your 100 in 105 or something like that. You've then got the rest of that time to do what you want. So if you want to get nice easy 150 in, or if you just want to get on poolside and stretch, it's entirely up to you how you use that time, but you have to be ready to go again on the 12 past or the whatever it is.
It's like a skin set, like the old. Well, I say the old session. People still do them. I've done them. Did a medley skins at the Welsh Master short course in November, and it's funny how some people will get out the water and then will just sit down for the rest of the 3 minutes. Do their swim, whether it's a freestyle swim or it's a medley swim, they'll get out, they'll sit down for the next 2.5 minutes. And you'll have some people who are swinging their arms and keeping everything moving, and everybody views it differently, or everyone has different experiences within their own body. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, is how people feel in themselves, regardless of what the proven advice is, that you want to keep moving or you need to do X, Y, Z. Some people in their body will just go, this is what my body needs right now, and this is how I'm going to deal with it.
Absolutely. Instinct takes over, doesn't it? But I guess that kind of training must be a difficult sell, I think, for a Masters club, again, because we both have setups where we swim with Masters, but in age group squads.
Yes.
I think it's easier to sell this to a 16-year-old to say, right, we're going to spend, tonight's session is just going to be, really low volume, but we're going to do 600s max off the block, or even, 4 max 100s.
Yeah.
That's going to take us half an hour. I think that's a difficult sell to Masters who may not even be interested in sprinting. They might be 400-meter swimmers. I really enjoyed that type of training. It's not something I'd want to do too often, but I think to throw one in every so often, I came out and I was buzzing from it.
Yes. I think one of the things that's really, unless you've got a club that is really not competitive, people swim for the love of swimming, which is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Most of us have come up through a system that prioritizes and prizes volume.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it as much of a hard sell as anything else, that you kind of feel like you need that volume to be faster and be stronger. And things are moving a long way. I still think you need some volume in sessions, and I know that's something that I've benefited from with my hundreds, having done a reasonable amount of 400 and 800 work. but at the same time, it is that balance of quality over quantity and quality. Sorry. You do need a large amount of that quality work, because ultimately that's the whole point of USRPT.
Yeah,
exactly. You can look at someone like Michael Andrews, who solely does USRPT. Yeah. And I mean, we don't know what he does as his program, but he espouses USRPT as what he enjoys doing and what works for him. But I think the way he races, and you see him swim a 200 medley, and you can see, well, maybe he would benefit from a little bit more volume. Maybe not doing loads.
Yeah.
When I was 18, I was doing 80k a week for 1500 swimming and doing the odd 200 fly and that sort of thing. And now, if I'm lucky, I'm doing 10k a week.
Yeah,
an absolute push, and it's probably more like 7 to 8.
Yeah.
And yet, 4 years ago, I did a lifetime best. And last summer, I was not far off that, considering we'd had COVID in between.
Yes.
So, yeah, obviously my body's changed in that time, and I understand it. And I think once you've been through that a little bit, it's easier to understand as well. But like I said, the heart it can be a hard sell, and I think you have to kind of get people on board with how it feels, as much as talking about the benefits of it, because it's so easy to talk about benefits, and these are the positives for it, but it's people actually enjoying it and feeling it that's important.
Completely agree. I mean, I can tell you what, I certainly felt it after just doing a couple on Tuesday night, but no, it was really fun. But I just wonder, like, in the context of not just that type of training, but any type of training that's maybe a bit more race specific or whatever. Where we are now, we're about 7 to 8 weeks from nationals,
yes.
which is probably the main event for a lot of master swimmers, for their kind of annual calendar. So again, from a sort of swimmer's perspective, as you are a swimmer, but also from a coach's perspective, would you be sort of saying, okay, 7-8 weeks, this is one final push, we're at the kind of like the final block, if you like.
Yes.
Would you be saying, much the same, which is, for a lot of masters clubs would just be generic type of sessions where you're covering a lot of bases, some aerobic work, threshold, a bit of speed, some technique, basically covering all bases? Or would you be saying, now's time to get a bit more targeted, whatever that means for you?
Yeah. I would have people working hard, whatever hard means for you as an individual, as you say, but I'd have people working really hard up until about 2 to 3 weeks out.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at tapering, and depending on the athlete, that taper might look slightly different. And depending on the volume of swimming as well, if you're doing 3 or 4 hours in the water, that will look different to someone who's maybe doing 10 to 12 hours, because you have more wiggle room with what you're doing in the water. What I would be probably doing is maybe up to for the next couple of weeks still working probably more of that volume sort of thing, and like I say, lots of threshold and keeping that aerobic capacity as strong as possible. And then over that 3 weeks down towards the couple of weeks taper is doing a bit more race specific stuff. So it's still working hard, but like you say, becoming a bit more specific, becoming a bit more personal to you, whether you're working over 50s and 100s, or if you're someone who is doing 200s and 400s, maybe looking more at race pace over race distance. So you might do sets of 4-100s trying to hold 400 pace, or sets of 450s at 200 pace, and you can then rep through that a little bit. That would be kind of my area of specificity, and still obviously keeping on top of the skills like your dives and your turns, where you can. I was going to say even at our age, but I think especially at our age and getting older, as you go into those older masters age groups, those skills become more and more important, because things like leverage off the wall with that drive and all the stuff that Nathan will work on with strength, and that drive off the blocks, that's free, easy speed. And it's something you tell the kids that a lot of them don't get or struggle with the confidence with. But actually, it's like when you look at, I use Becky Adlington as an example quite regularly when I talk about skills. Like, her turns in 2008 and 2012 were crap.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. I mean, she was an Olympic gold medalist and an Olympic bronze medalist in London. But she was losing 2 or 3 meters a length in that 2012 final to Katie Ledecky every single turn, and she was swimming quicker between the walls. And this is someone who's supposed to kind of know better theoretically because she's at the top of the game. And you think, right, okay, so you can work on that volume all day long, you can work on that swimming all day long, but if you're losing, I don't know, 2% every length over an 800, that adds up.
Completely agree. Yeah, I just going back to the more targeted training, especially kind of race-based training as we get closer.
Yes.
Again, it's hard, isn't it? Depends what your setup is as a club. If you're a club that's got a lot of swimmers, and 60-70% of those swimmers aren't even going to go to nationals.
Yes.
They're not going to be turned on by the idea of, okay, let's get on the blocks and let's get some heavy work in. But again, this is maybe where you could almost split the session in half and say, right, this half of the pool, I'll give you a session A, and this half of the pool, it's going to be a session B, and it's going to be more focused on what you want to work on. And I guess that's probably it's a difficult one for a coach, isn't it, for sure?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, I've been teaching coaching for 20 years. So I'm sort of experienced compared to a lot of coaches, but I'm also not experienced compared to a lot of coaches. And, you've got some who've been coaching for 40, 50 years. So I'm not going to be telling coaches how they can spend their time because, they're going to probably know a lot more than me, and they're going to know a lot more about their swimmers. But I think if you're swimming in a group where you don't really have a coach, I think you're absolutely right. I think splitting your resources. So if you've only got a couple of lanes, you can have one lane that is, let's call it race specific, and one lane that is, let's tap up and down. And that's not to be rude about someone who just wants to come and swim, because they're absolutely valid. But like you say, everybody's got different targets with what they want to do, and just swimming out the week's stress is just as valid a target as someone who's racing in 6 or 7 weeks' time. I think the opposite side of that coin is, you can almost say, well, the rest of the year we accommodate the wanting to just swim up and down a little bit more, so the priority with the group or the club and the resources can be more swayed towards that racing side.
Yeah,
a little bit more. I mean, space is always a difficult one, and it's why I haven't really swum much over the summer, because I don't really enjoy going and swimming in a busy public swim. And that's the thing with a lot of masters clubs. If you've only got 1 or 2 lanes that you're next to public swimming, you don't have that space available. So
yeah, completely. It's a very difficult one, and one for coaches to have to really think about. And so something else I'd be interested to get your thoughts on is the idea of using equipment, because actually over this summer, said at the start of the podcast that for example, I had a week where the club wasn't swimming, so I went and did my own sessions, and I actually used that as a time to do things that we just would not normally do in a swimming session. So I think I mentioned on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, I did just 20-25 max sprints.
Yes.
I loved it. And then a couple of other sessions, I did nothing but use, I practically clothed myself in as much equipment as possible.
Yeah.
Because again, we don't normally do that. And I just had some fun and got a bit playful with it. As we get closer to racing, is this where you would start to say, take the equipment off, because now you want to feel what it feels like in a race?
Yes and no. I think, we talked before, I think last time I was on, or one of maybe the first time I was on, we were talking about training blocks, and I said about, post, because it was post nationals last year that was the first conversation we had. And that time in the 2 months afterwards should be about play. And it's basically what you've been doing now is doing the stuff that you don't necessarily get a chance to do. But swimming with fins, or swimming with paddles or something like that, or swimming with a snorkel can be a really good way of doing really fast stuff. You can mix these things in and out to get you feeling that feel of racing really fast. One of the things, Jez has got these mesh bags, they're like socks, they go over your feet. And so we will do sets where we go once through wearing socks, and they drag your feet down and they make kicking really hard. And then you go one sort of normal with no toys or no extra kit, and then you go one with fins, and you just go super speed. And that, especially going through taper, can be a really useful skill, because it just makes you feel fast, and it makes you feel, well, you're racing. Well, okay, with fins on, you'll be racing quicker than you'll be actually racing, but having a bit of fatigue in the legs as well. So I'm not one who would swear off kit in sort of those final weeks and those tune-up sessions. I think kit can be really, really useful as long as you're not just relying on it to get you there. Because, again, we go back to the triathletes that I would coach. There are some triathletes who will absolutely rely on their pool boy.
Yes.
And they won't do any swims without a pool boy because they're not used to focusing on getting the body in the right position, or they find that too difficult.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And something I'm always intrigued. I think I know what your answer is going to be, given that you're a coach, and you probably say both are good. But
Yes.
this idea of slowing down versus speeding up. So I remember hearing, I read Anthony Irvin's book a while back, and he talked about the idea of, using like parachutes or anything that basically adds resistance and slows you down.
Yes.
He's like, well, why on earth would I want to be slowed down? That makes no sense to me. Whereas some people probably love the idea of swimming against resistance because it gets them stronger. So Anthony Irvin's thought was, I only want things that are going to speed me up. So what are your thoughts on adding equipment that will slow you down versus equipment that will speed you up? I mean, you talked about the fins a minute ago and the drug socks.
Yeah, as you said, both. But what I would say is both have their place. Both are good, but they both have their place, and they have their place when they're used pointedly or specifically. It's not about just using them for the sake of using them, because if you are just using them, it's like and I will use the term plodding up and down, and it is this time it is intended to be kind of a pejorative term. Like, if you are just plodding up and down, if you're plowing up and down and you're not thinking about what you're doing, you're not going to get a huge amount out of it. If you're just dragging well, we used to have a bucket when I was swimming 20 years ago, but if you're dragging some sort of resistive element up and down a pool, it's not going to do a huge amount for you. But if you drag that up and down a couple of lengths and then you do some super fast stuff, then you're going to get that super speed, that kind of neural proprioception.
Yeah.
It's like doing a squat with a weight on your shoulders, taking the weight off, and then doing an explosive jump, and you will go higher off the ground. And it's kind of that idea that you want to prime yourself to accelerate through the water or off the blocks as hard as you can.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And I think, again, for me, I'd imagine that the idea of slowing yourself down would say a parachute or whatever it may be. That's probably really good at, the classic start of the season when you kind of just really going to get into that heavy training. Whereas when you're getting closer to a race, I'd envisage actually having fins on would be more fun because you get to feel that overspeed. Yeah,
I'm not sure swimming with a parachute bungee cords can be, so it's another thing we have, and some people have access to this and some don't, but we have bungee cords. So we will do swims where you will swim, I think the cords are like 15 meters. They will stretch if you are strong enough. You can get to 25 meters just about. But we will do that swim where you swim as far as you can with the bungee. And if you can't get to 25, you just do 5 to 10 strokes on the spot, essentially. And then you will turn and you will then have that acceleration coming back. So you really do have that instant change from being resisted to super speed. But then you don't necessarily need kit to slow you down.
Yeah.
You talk about the difference between, or the two ends of the spectrum. You look at someone like Alexander Popov, who was 53 world record holder at one point. I don't think he held the 100, but he was someone who had textbook probably doesn't go far enough to describe how good his form was. And if you haven't seen Popov's technique, you should look on YouTube because it is fantastic. He would do super slow swimming. He would do swimming, like his cadence would be incredibly slow, focusing on making sure his arms were at the right position all the way through the stroke. Now, that helps when you're in the Russian system where you have 20, 25 hours a week and you can do loads and loads of swimming like that as well as the fast stuff.
Yeah.
But it clearly didn't slow him down. One of my favourite sets to get people to do, and I do this with triathletes and I'll do this with swimmers as well, and I do it myself, is to do that contrast with no kit and do sets of 25 or 50 and go as slow as you can for the first rep and then go as fast as you can for the second rep. And the challenge is to make as big a gap as you can in those times, but doing it with good technique. So that extra layer for swimmers, especially who have a bit more awareness and have a bit more understanding, so probably not so much with triathletes, is to try and keep the same stroke count. So if you do 12 strokes for a 25 or 15 strokes for a 25, your aim is to be within 1 or 2 strokes either side of that for both lengths,
Oh, interesting.
rather than just swimming as slow as you can but having crap technique.
Yeah.
So you still have to float your body through it. You still have to be moving forwards.
Yeah. And would you turn as well at the 25 to kind of not stop?
So if I'm getting people doing 25s, or if I've done it myself at 25s, I've just do it to touch, because you do it to touch and then you do it to touch the other way.
Yeah.
And you can do them off, I don't know, 30 or 40 to 50 seconds. You can do it as a part of a quality set.
Mm.
But just to get you focusing on balance and control and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a real favourite of mine, and I've really enjoyed doing that as a swimmer, and getting people to think about it. Because again, that idea that you just get to the other end as quickly as you can, doesn't matter whether you're a triathlete who's a relatively new swimmer or whether you're a master swimmer who's been doing swimming for 10 years or whatever.
Mm.
The idea of how big a gap in time can I make is, like you say, it's quite exciting. It's like going as hard as you can for 100 meters because that's 50 meters because that's what your race distance is.
Mm. Yeah, well, I fancy giving that a go myself now that you've you mentioned that. I'm swimming tonight on my own, so that's something I might incorporate.
Yeah.
So we talked about nationals, and you said you're considering doing it this year, which is great. But you're also considering doing the new European short course event that has been announced in Madeira in Portugal. Takes place at the end of November, 19th to the 25th.
Yes,
quite a recent thing. In fact, you alerted me to it a week or so ago, which I didn't realise. So it's something you're considering.
Yes, I'm pretty close to going. I think the thing's open on Monday, and talking to some of the guys who came back from Japan, it looks. I don't want to start rumours, so I'm passing on second-hand information, and I won't share my sources because I don't want to shoot the messengers. But the understanding is that there may or may not be a European long course masters next May. They were supposed to be in Kazan in Russia, and rumours are that because that's not going to happen, they're not going to change it to somewhere else. So there's I think reasonably solid rumours that there's going to be a Worlds in Doha in February. I wanted to take the opportunity to do the race now, whilst I can, and possibly do Doha in February. So almost maybe using Sheffield as a final warm-up competition, sort of 2.5 weeks out, 3 weeks out from going to Madeira. So that'll be interesting. Yeah,
absolutely. And so if you're doing both nationals and you're doing the European short course, would you? I mean, you kind of just answered this there really by saying it's more of a warm-up, but would you? Yes. For example, enter everything that you want to enter for nationals and then again in Madeira, or would you spread your races out?
So Madeira, my plan, looking at the program, is to enter 4 events. I'm not going to enter the longer events that I would normally do. I'd normally do an 800 and a couple of like the open water.
Yeah.
But because the open water at Madeira is kind of interspersed with the swims, it actually clashes. Like the 1.5k open water, which I probably would do, is on the same day as the 100 fly.
Yeah.
So I could potentially do them, but it doesn't really sit quite so well. I haven't decided about Sheffield what I'll swim. We as a club look like we might have a couple of relay teams entered, which will be a lot of fun. And I think that's one of the reasons why I fancy going up and doing Sheffield, is because we've actually got a relay team going from Bristol, or potentially. So that will be cool. And then I'll probably just do a few races around that. So I'll see how things sort of fit.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And I'm glad you mentioned about the open water systems, because I was going to say that there are, on my limited knowledge of this event, sort of having a look at the website, there are going to be 2 open water events, and there is obviously a full program of pool swimming as well. So you can check that out at www.len.eu and go to the Masters section, and it'll all be there. All the information will be there for you. I believe they are working with hotels as well to try and get discounts on accommodation. So again, if it is something you're considering doing, hopefully there is some savings to be had around all of that.
It's an interesting one. Everything was leaked about a month ago now, and it looked like Len were only going to allow you to enter if you booked through their hotels and everything else. And talking to people in the unofficial British Masters Facebook group, there was a lot of consternation around this, to put it mildly. And by the sounds of things, Len had it suggested to them that this wasn't necessarily particularly legal or particularly the right way to go around things. So the final released version doesn't lock you into that. And actually, from the leaked version to the official announced version, it's actually considerably cheaper if you do book everything through Len, which to encourage you to do that, which I'm not sure how wrong or right that may be, but actually it does make it a little bit more affordable. One of the things I've enjoyed about events previously, like going to Rome last year, a few of us got an Airbnb together, and that obviously cut the cost considerably. And it's one of the nice things about going and exploring somewhere else, racing in Korea or racing in Slovenia. Parts of the reasons I've gone there is to go and explore and kind of do the tourist bit as well as doing the racing. And it's one of the reasons I want to go to Madeira as well. It's been on my bucket list of places to go for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Portugal kind of late November as well would, provide people with that bit of sunshine that by that time of the year in the UK, we're starting to really, really miss. So I think as well, it's quite a nice place to go at that time of the year.
I like the fact that you looked out the window and it's grey outside.
It is so awful out here today. It's so that was a good timing to mention that. It's incredibly misty and dreary. So, it seems like our summer's already over, I'm afraid. 1st of September, that's it now. So we're on the decline to winter. But listen, thank you for joining us again, John. It's it's always great to speak to you, and look forward to obviously seeing you at Nationals soon, which isn't that far away. So hope all your training goes well.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks a lot, mate. Cheers.